As you may have heard, the egregious Greg Bavino, basically fascist, is out of Minneapolis, and it looks like he is going to be forced into retirement. Good riddance. Problem, however, is that Bovino is being replaced by an equally awful fascist and thug, Tom Homan. Now, according to reports, the temperature is being lowered in Minneapolis, and Homan met with the mayor of that city as well as Governor Tim Walz, and hopefully a solution can be reached here. But I've been trying to think about, what a metaphor or an analogy for what's going on. Is this a shuffling of the deck chairs on the Titanic? Well, no, not exactly. Because, sorry to say, ICE isn't going anywhere. So I can't think of exactly what this is like, but what I do know is we cannot fall for it. Homan still has a job. So too does Kristi Noem, who is, along with Bovino, largely responsible for the chaos and horror that has been unleashed on the citizens of Minneapolis. Also, Kash Patel, J.D. Vance, and others in the Trump regime who defamed the murder victims, Renee Good and Alex Pretti, before we knew everything we needed to know about those shootings. This is, if nothing else, a way for Donald to change the subject and evade responsibility, because one thing we know about him is he never takes responsibility for anything. He is never to blame for anything. Somebody else always gets thrown under the bus. That's just who he is. This time, it's Greg Bovino. It may well be Kristi Noem in the not too distant future. But what exactly is going to change? I'll tell you the thing that worries me most. That Democrats will fall for this and somehow back off their insistence that ICE be entirely dismantled. They have a lot of leverage here because, as you may know, budget talks are coming up. There's a deadline. A budget has to be passed in order to keep the government open. And finally, Senate Democrats have been saying they will not vote to fund ICE and the DHS. They will risk a government shutdown if the Republicans don't agree that ICE and DHS be defunded. Many Democrats are also calling for Kristi Noem to be impeached or at least fired. So, is what's happening now, the slight change in personnel, trading one Nazi for another, is that going to make Democrats think that all is well and we can just go along to get along? It's worth keeping ICE in operation as long as we keep the government open. Well, I certainly hope not, because you have the useless senator from Maine, Republican Susan Collins, saying that she is going to keep funding for ICE in play. We have Donald suddenly saying that the problem here is that you should not bring a gun to a peaceful protest, even though Mr. Pretti was carrying his gun legally and it remained in its holster the entire time. In other words, Donald will not allow your constitutional rights, even if it's your Second Amendment right to carry a gun in America, interfere with his chosen narrative that, after all, Alex Pretti is to blame for his own death. Sending Homan to Minnesota and essentially firing Bovino is not enough here. The entire system has to be dismantled. This is, if nothing else, window dressing. And Democrats need to understand that. It changes nothing about the fact that Donald Trump is responsible for unleashing a fascist regime into American cities, and they need to make it stop. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Mary Trump Live. Thank you so much for being here with me. It's Tuesday, apparently. The fallout from the events in Minneapolis is still going on. It's intensifying, in fact. And the killing of Alex Pretti by ICE is not something that we can leave in the past. Last night, Donald held a closed door to our meeting in the Oval Office with Homeland Security Secretary and puppy murderer Kristi Noem, who was joined by her senior advisor and boyfriend, Corey Lewandowski, who was once one of Donald's campaign managers. According to CNN, Noem requested the meeting herself, and it was described as a frank discussion about how to continue the administration's immigration agenda amid growing national backlash. In other words, the meeting was about damage control and the desire to continue doing what they've been doing, but just somehow market it differently. If there were to be a real change in direction, perhaps the meeting would have involved Stephen Miller, but he was not there. Greg Bovino, who cosplays as a Nazi, has been demoted and, as I mentioned, removed from the state. Not a huge surprise, considering the public comments Bovino made, such as these.
With respect, it feels as though, in some ways, you're blaming the victim here.
The victims are the Border Patrol agents. I'm not blaming the Border Patrol agents. The victim are the Border Patrol agents. The suspect put himself in that situation. The victims are the Border Patrol agents there.
Yes, the poor Border Patrol agents with their masked face and their semi-automatic weapons and their riot gear. They are the victims. According to the video I watched, Mr. Pretti was pinned by 7 ICE agents and then shot in the back, despite the fact that he never had a gun in his hand. He had a phone, and his other hand was empty. So, as I mentioned, Donald is bringing in the so-called border czar, Tom Homan, which, again, last I checked, Minnesota does not share a contiguous border with Mexico, but I guess who cares? Apparently, we're supposed to believe that this represents a response, as I said. But this is tantamount to treating the fever with aspirin while completely ignoring the fact that you've got gangrene. We have to, again, recognize that I believe this is just a feint. This is a way to wait it out. This is a way to make it seem like real change is being made, while all along we need to hang on to the fact that these people continue to blame Renee Good and Alex Pretti for their murders at the hands of ICE agents. The Trump regime continues to try to run down the character of the real victim in this case, but their claims don't hold up. Bovino said that this was a situation where an individual wanted to cause maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Kristi Noem said this was an act of domestic terrorism on the part of Mr. Pretti and said, quote, "That's the facts," unquote. Stephen Miller went further, claiming a domestic terrorist tried to assassinate federal agents. Well, if that's the case, I've yet to see any evidence of that, because the person in question certainly wasn't Mr. Pretti, because none of those descriptions line up with the facts, which we have on video. Friends, family, and people who actually knew Alex Pretti are speaking out, and the person they're describing bears absolutely no resemblance to the person being maligned by Donald's White House. Here's a report from CNN last night.
A lot of people had a lot of respect for him. An attack on Alex feels like an attack on all of us.
His former high school classmate described him as someone with a zest for life.
I don't have words to describe the amount of rage that I have when he's described as a domestic terrorist. That he was there to help people. He was there to spread a message of warmth and love in this country.
He graduated from the University of Minnesota in 2011 with a degree in biology, society, and the environment. He was a research scientist before he became a registered nurse. He was an outdoorsman who also loved the theater and the arts. His parents released a statement describing their son. Alex, they said, was a kind-hearted soul who cared deeply for his family and friends, and also the American veterans whom he cared for. Alex wanted to make a difference in this world. Unfortunately, he will not be with us to see his impact. A former teacher recalled, "He was a good student who loved helping people. I'm not one bit surprised that his final act on this earth was to help a woman who'd been viciously thrown to the ground."
This is a guy who was trying to serve others, too. He was genuine. He was kind. He was friendly to everybody that I know.
That is the man that the Trump regime would have you believe was a vicious domestic terrorist. Again, they seem not to understand how video works. It is even more clear in this case than it was in the Renee Good case. And in the Renee Good case, it was blindingly clear that neither of these people was guilty of anything except exercising their rights as an American in a peaceful way. This afternoon, as Donald was leaving the White House en route to a speech in Iowa to tout his failing economy, he was asked if he thought the killing of Alex Pretti was justified. Here's his response.
Do you believe that Alex Pretti's death was justified?
Well, you know, we're doing a big investigation. I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself.
Well, the fact that Donald doesn't know what either of those words mean, honest, honorable, should give us pause here. And last I checked, the state of Minnesota has been locked out of this investigation. The people who shot Alex Pretti are still on the job, but we don't know where. Donald was also asked if Kristi Noem would remain as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Take a look.
Is Kristi Noem going to step down?
No.
Well, that's definitive. No. Why should she? She murders puppies and gives ICE agents license to murder innocent Americans. She's awesome. Here he is giving her a quick job review.
I think she's doing a very good job. The border is totally secure. You know, you forget. We had a border that I inherited where millions of people were coming through. Now we have a border where no one is coming through. They come into our country only legally. So you have to remember those things. You know, people forget as soon as you accomplish something, it goes into history and nobody ever wants to talk about it. We had a border that caused all of this problem. Biden caused, and the Democrats caused this problem. They allowed tens of millions of people to come in. Many of them were murderers. Many were drug dealers, drug addicts, people from mental institutions. They allowed these people to violate our country, to come into our country. And that's what we're talking about. So if you remember, we had a horrible border, the worst border we've ever had, ever in history. People were flowing through by, we think, 25 million people, not to mention drugs and everything else. And that border is absolutely closed.
I am so bloody tired of that delusional, mendacious idiot. I don't have the words to express my disgust with him. But are we to believe that Alex Pretti is dead because of the border? Last I checked, he was born here. And again, Minnesota is nowhere near the Mexican border. And even though I mentioned this before, I want to play this clip of what Donald had to say about guns. NRA, are you listening? Fascinating. That's the leader of the party who believes, or at least pretends to believe, that every single white American should have the right to have any kind of gun they want at any time, in any place, in any quantity, with large magazines, regardless of whether they are convicted of domestic violence, for example, or have serious mental health issues. Yes, the leader of that party just said there are certain circumstances in which you shouldn't have guns. And if you have a gun under those circumstances, even if you keep it holstered and even if you're legally entitled to carry it, as Mr. Pretti was, oh well, you deserve to be killed. Today, Governor Tim Walz's office said Tom Homan has agreed to work toward ending what it called a campaign of retribution against the state. Interesting. In a statement, the office said Walz and Homan met Tuesday morning and, quote, agreed on the need for an ongoing dialogue, unquote, and we continue working toward the state's goal, impartial investigations into the killings of Renee Good and Alex Pretti, both United States citizens, by federal agents, and a swift reduction of federal forces in Minnesota. And by swift reduction, I hope they mean total removal. It is time for blue state governors to exercise their not inconsiderable power and rebuff the incursions of this out-of-control fascistic federal government. In a press conference yesterday, Governor Walz was asked about, quote, bringing the temperature down, unquote, when dealing with the Trump regime, as well as the Attorney General's attempt to extort the voter roll information from the state. And not just the voter roll information, but also data concerning any recipients of SNAP and Medicaid benefits. Here was Walz's response with a particular nod to Pam Bondi. Take a look.
And is there anything you can do to meet the Trump administration at least part of the way to try to turn this temperature down?
Well, first of all, it's not a serious attempt. And in that letter, they talked about, you need to hand people over who are in your jails. They're taking credit for people that we've had in jail for a long time. We always hand them over, and the commissioner very clearly. So they're lying. They're lying. This has nothing to do with fraud. As the Attorney General said, they're not sending us forensic accountants. And these are things that have been we're dealing with now and have been for quite some time. So look, it's not a serious attempt to get at this. The way to fix this is get these folks out of here. We've continued to work with them. They asked us for these numbers. We provided them. We continue to show, and they're not serious. And look, I think everybody understands what the last request was, totally unrelated to anything on the voter files. This is, again, as the Attorney General said, Donald Trump telling everybody that the election was rigged, who started all this nightmare for America, has nothing to do with it. And I would just give a pro tip to the Attorney General. There's 2 million documents in the Epstein files we're still waiting on. Go ahead and work on those.
Thank you, Governor Walz. This is how it's done. And again, I think it's worth focusing on this point. What the Attorney General is doing here is trying to extort the governor of Minnesota to get him to turn over very sensitive private information having to do with his citizens in exchange for the removal of ICE agents, which tells us what exactly? Well, that the Trump regime is desperate to rig the 2026 midterms, first of all, and secondly, that they don't really give a shit about the security of the American people and protecting us from immigrants and undocumented workers, which, by the way, we don't need, because immigrants and undocumented workers help make this country a place we all want to live in. It is the Trump regime that makes this country a place in which we are constantly stressed out, afraid, and increasingly hopeless. But let's not give that to them, shall we? Last, I want to listen to what the Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon, had to say to Chris Jansing earlier today about the Trump regime's effort to get the state's voter information.
No, they don't need this data. And federal and state privacy laws, we maintain, say that they don't get that data. It's hard to know what's really going on, because my first reaction when I saw this letter mere hours after a second person, let's remember, a second U.S. citizen was gunned down in Minneapolis by ICE or Border Patrol, my reaction was one of shock because this has nothing to do with any of that. What does producing the voter rolls have to do with forces on the ground, with immigration law, with customs and border? It doesn't have anything to do with that. So I don't know what they're really up to. What I do know is this request is not new. Minnesota is one of 42 states that DOJ has asked to produce this data. About 10 have said yes, about 32 have said no, like Minnesota. This is in active litigation right now, so they shouldn't have been shocked or surprised that our position is that the law does not entitle them to obtain these voter records.
There you go. Could not be more clear. Thank you. Whew. All right, let us breathe, shall we? Whew. With that, thankfully, we've reached the emotional support moment for today. And because, this is where I usually want to be, we're going back to the sea. Speaking of water, though, the half of the Hudson River is basically ice flows because it's been so bloody cold for so bloody long. It's kind of fascinating. I mean, I have no doubt this has happened before, but, I've only lived in Manhattan since 2021. So this is the first real winter storm we've had. So it has not been this cold for this long in many years. So it is fascinating to see. I mean, not that the Hudson River is a swiftly flowing river by any stretch of the imagination, but when a river starts freezing, it's freaking cold. Luckily, where we're going right now, it's warmer. We're going to hang out with the sea turtles. And sea turtles have this way of reminding me that not everything is an emergency. Sometimes you just need to float. Just relax and go with the flow, so to speak. So please enjoy this video, take a breath, and relax. That's my kind of blue. I actually have a thing tonight, so unfortunately, I am not going to be able to go through your questions, comments, etc. But don't worry, we'll just go long next time. So please come back. To wrap up, I just want to thank everybody who's watching on YouTube, everybody who's streaming on Twitter and over at my Substack, The Good in Us. To all of our new members, everybody gifting memberships, all of our super stickers, and everybody giving us donations. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Truly, we appreciate you guys more than I can say. As we've been talking about for a while now, media, social media in particular in America is, going through some rough times. And it's getting harder and harder for voices on the left to break through, particularly on platforms like Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and, even Meta. So any way you can show your support is truly appreciated. even if that's just subscribing to the channel, which again doesn't cost anything. And after you subscribe, please click on the bell icon and make sure that you click all. That way you'll be alerted every time a new video drops. And if you are already a subscriber, please check that. Check to make sure that you've clicked all. Now, the problem we're facing on YouTube is that sometimes, even when people do that, they're still not getting alerted. So if you think of it, if you come for the live, just remember to go to our homepage. And that way you'll see all of our other videos, because we have at least 2 pre-recorded videos in addition to the live 7 days a week. So worth checking out. Another really simple way to support us is watch those pre-recorded videos, like them, share them, comment on them. That kind of helps us with the algorithm, theoretically. Also, what would be great is if you could check out our Substack, The Good in Us. Go to marytrump.org, and that will take you right to our Substack homepage. Just like with YouTube, subscribing is free, but there's also a paid option that you might want to check out. Just like here, that is a phenomenal community, and I would like everybody on Substack to be here and everybody here to be on Substack. I think that would be phenomenal. Oh, and we have merch. So go check out our merch, because I think it's really cool. I don't have any yet. Look at it. Oh my God. I want that mug. I want that t-shirt. I want all of it. I got particularly, yeah, look how I love those colors, quite frankly. And yes, we are where fake news goes to die. And new designs are going to be coming in the not too distant future, and we will keep you alerted to those. And yes, if you want to check us out on Patreon, we have some paid options on YouTube and on Patreon. And that basically, you could just go to that QR code. And much like YouTube paid subs on Patreon, if you become a paid subscriber, there's bonus content, which sometimes is just my laughing uncontrollably. But it's oftentimes more substantive than that, I promise you. Okay, finally, I want to thank all of our amazing moderators who just hold this all together in a way that impresses me every day. And of course, to my amazing team who's stuck by me through thick and thin. This year in particular has been a wild ride. So I could not have done it without you guys. So thank you for everything you do. And that is it for us tonight. Remember, Mary Trump Live is Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget about those pre-recorded videos dropping every single day. Also on weekends, so don't forget that. All right, everybody. Have an amazing night. I will see you soon. In the meantime, please stay safe.